How's it going, guys? This is Shane again, meeting leader with ORCA. We're continuing our coverage of the Smart Recovery Handbook this week. We're on Chapter 4. I want to go ahead and apologize. I'm sorry I didn't upload a video for you guys last week. It's been a heck of a week, as you all probably have had to. Thanksgiving, we've been in the middle of a move, putting up Christmas decorations, sick nephews, so give you an idea, this is where I'm at in my life. Yeah, boxes everywhere. In the office, a mess, but hey, we're still doing it. But I'm very sorry that I didn't upload you guys anything last week, but I planned on covering Chapter 4 in 2 different videos since it's about 18 pages long. But just like Chapter 3, it is mostly a lot of tools and exercises, and we won't have to talk much about the reading, but going through some of these exercises, looking at them with each other, and pointing out some bullet points will probably go a long way in helping us do what this chapter is pointing out for us, which the chapter is called Coping with Urges, which is, of course, a big deal for us as recovering opiate addicts. So let's go. All right, so the first little bit of the chapter is talking about our beliefs about urges. So basically what we're doing here is a lot of this chapter is about identifying them and change the way we think about thought processes that trigger urges. So kind of like we've talked about before about identifying, challenging, and changing the way we think. Well, this, just like the last chapter, is a very literal type of tool set and exercise set to specifically point out a lot of these thought processes and change our perception of them, which I know is hard, but hey, that's what we got to do, man. So it breaks it down to many different things, like your unrealistic beliefs in your urges. Like one example I read was I got into a fight with my boss, so it made me feel like I need to go use, or else I won't be able to deal with my irrational feelings. You know, just things like that that we need to switch our perception on. And there's a lot of unrealistic things that we've put on our addictive behavior in the past. You know, such as unrealistic belief that there's emotions that I felt that there was no other option but to use to cope with. You know, those are the kinds of things that we know are unrealistic. They're really just an excuse for us to go do what we wanted to do, right? So the first part of the chapter is kind of talking about that mostly, and then identifying with our triggers. Now this becomes a more in-depth process, right? Just like we've talked about many times before, peeling back the layers of the onion and all the things that go with it. Identifying specific trigger events for specific addictions we have. A lot of us have multiple. Just there's a chart on page 27. It's called Identifying Triggers, and it shows a few things. Heroin, if we had a heroin addiction, sex, cocaine, food, alcohol, so on and so forth. And it goes on to give you these these trigger examples for each one of these specific addictions. Now, you might have one thing on this list, you might have multiple. I had multiple, so don't feel bad if you do. You know, that's what we're here for, to treat all the sick thinking, you know, stinking thinking, as you would hear in the 12-step groups. But yeah, based on those examples, you know, going ahead and talking about writing down some of your addictive behaviors and listing the trigger examples for them. This will go a long way into helping you put a step before those events start to take hold in the future, right? Again, it might seem pretty self-explanatory or common sense, but we rarely exude common sense when we're in the midst of trigger events. Very much a lot of hot emotions, right? Just crazy stuff going on. So, like in our other chapters, it's good to have tangible things to look back at, right? So, assessing trigger events that cause urges is a large part of this. A lot of these exercises are going to be you digging deep and pulling out specific risks, specific events that cause trigger events that cause your urges. You go on to look at the risks of each trigger. It could be a certain smell. It could be anything, right? It could be going to the beach. It could be riding down a certain road. It could be being in someone else's company. It could be so many, all the people, places, and things, right? The 3 Ps. So when we're going into our next exercise, a lot of that's talking about trigger risks. Again, just like before, it sets its own examples of trigger risks, like the trigger of unpleasant emotional anger, frustration, grief, etc. That's a very vague list, but you can go onto your trigger events worksheet and list your addictive behaviors, and then you can rank those from 1 to 10. For example, we've got to watch our negative talk. But, for example, there would be times when a certain thought might trigger me to vomit or something like that. I know that might be extreme, but everybody has different things that happen when they're triggered and there's an urge, but I had a problem with that early in my recovery. So I would definitely put that as a 10, right? You're actually trigger events, the perception of and the effect that it had on me. I put on such a kind of a pedestal in the beginning of my recovery that it cost me physically, and I'm sure we all have triggers that are comparable to that. So this is our chance to really dig deep, list some of those really at-risk things. Put the little things too. Me personally, I would want to put the bigger things because that's what we really want to weed out right now. We'll get to all of it because this book is going to be here far into our recovery. It's just like everything else, we can reuse it, but especially early in recovery and early through trying to change our destructive thinking and the thinking our addictive behaviors prompted us into. Getting the big things out of the way is probably a good way to go. Our urges are going to be the biggest battle we face in our first few months of recovery, for sure. But there's sometimes, urges come up here and there. A good motivation in recovery and doing things like this are what keep you strong and give you a plan to deal with these urges when they come, right? So after they talk, we get about halfway through the chapter and they start giving you your urge logs, right? So this is another one of them things. It might seem like common sense, but it gives you something to actually record some of these urges throughout the day, throughout the week, whatever you deem valid. And you can actually list out, exact times. I mean, wow, you can get really in depth to this. And it talks about how you cope with these urges. So you can literally go in here, started out the day, had a rough time in the morning, boss yelled at you, like you'll see an example further on in this chapter. And I had this trigger event occur. This is how I dealt with it, or this is how I didn't deal with it correctly. However you want to put it in there, but this is where and who it was with, how I coped, and my feelings about coping, alternative activities, and substitute behaviors, which they talk about substitute behaviors a little bit further along in this chapter. And you start to get into that a little bit now after you look at your figure 4 urge log, distracting yourself. This is when you're really starting to put things in the thought process that changes your perception. So when you start to feel one of these trigger events come on, this is a subchapter kind of some things we can distract ourselves with, right? We all take up things early in recovery, especially. It's good to, you'll see a lot of examples in here, but just from your own life experiences, physical activity, work, housework, family, basically things we can throw ourselves into to distract us from a lot of the urge factor. If we feel it coming on, if a trigger event has occurred, that's always a good idea. I know, man, me and Swiffer and Carpet Cleaner were really good friends, probably in the first year or two of my recovery. So this is another one where you can just take it wherever you want, right? It's even got lists of where you can list your distractions, just so you have a physical thing again to reference, and write down different things as you go, man. You might discover a new distraction. You might be a year into recovery, and all of a sudden you figure out, oh dang, man, I like Xbox. I'm saying that because I like Xbox so much, and that's one thing I used as a distraction big time. But anything, man, anything. Walk in the park, going fishing. I sound like a real Floridian right now, don't I? But just having a good set of distractions is very paramount into coping with urges early, and your coaches and your counselors will help you with that, and there's a lot of them that are available at the touch of a phone. So you'll have some help with that, but you know what you like, what's best for you. It's always a good thing to keep thinking about. We always could use more activity. More is better. But that goes kind of along with strategy in dealing with these urges, which leads you to your next section is basic strategies. It goes as far as to talk. You're going to see a lot of acronyms when you read this. A lot of one-word drops that you can, put in whatever you want. So, avoid, escape, distract yourself, develop coping statements, which I think that is a little further along, because further along in the chapter they talk about coping statements, things like if you if you know you're going to be around a trigger situation, let's say that you're going to a party, people are going to be drinking, you know the host, you're a little further along in your recovery, so you're pretty confident in your ability to stay clean, and you know you're going to be somewhere where people are getting served alcohol, and you just say, I'm not drinking tonight, so please don't even offer me a drink, things like that. And lastly, reviewing your CBA, cost-benefit analysis, which is what you're supposed to do every meeting you go to, except we're not doing meetings right now. But every Smart Recovery meeting, you're supposed to be, addressing your cost-benefit analysis. So it's even included under basic strategies for coping with urges. And like I said, all these things, what does avoidance mean to you? What's best for you to avoid these trigger situations? Or what's escape? What's a good way for you to escape and trigger event once it started to occur? What way to distract yourself, your coping statement. These are things that you'll develop and are good ideas to think of beforehand, because we're going to encounter these situations eventually. It's probably best to stay away from, when possible, early in recovery, is to do everything you can to stay away from a trigger event if you can foresee it happening. It's not realistic for us to think we can stay away from all trigger events for the rest of our lives. We're going to run into them, so but later on, when you do get into these trigger events and you're strong in your recovery, those last two things all come almost naturally. And with your basic strategies, this is another one of those things where you working through your recovery and the tools that you've come across so far, and as far as you are in the program, use these things all to, if you want to, make a weekly planner like they've got listed on page 33. Some people do think it makes it a lot easier to have your routine set out that far ahead. And it's always a good idea, very early in recovery. It's always a good idea in recovery, period. But to have a set schedule, plans for dealing with all these things already in a working facet that you can refer to, that's great. That's great. And again, you can fill this out however you think it best suits you, but earlier in recovery is when I take more guidance from my coaches and my counselors and stuff like that. But you know that. I'm telling you things you already know. I'm sorry. So, it talks about I just realized this, that in the middle of basic strategies, they throw this weekly planner in the middle of it, and I thought it was a completely different section. Wow, that just shows you where I've been in my week. But rating your urge, recall moments of clarity, recall negative consequences. These are a lot. You can read on down 9, 10, 11, 12. There's a lot of these things that occur in your cost-benefit analysis, and through your further working through other tools and some of the tools in this chapter. But like we were talking about before, developing a basic strategy for dealing with the triggers and the urges, if they follow, is paramount. That this is moving on to advanced strategies, which some of this stuff talks about what we were kind of just talking about. I guess I jumped ahead. The first thing it talks about is move beyond avoidance. where it talks eventually you'll be faced with the situations that there will be trigger events, or you'll be exposed to something that was previously a trigger event. There's some other things in here. The role play thing, it doesn't really apply because we don't have smart recovery meetings. But as soon as we start back after all this craziness to settle down, I hadn't done it in a group yet, but role play would definitely be a good idea. There's a lot of rehab facilities where they'll have a whole class where everybody's in a different group and they're given a situation, which is a trigger event type deal, or an actual event, and they all have to reenact it. And let me tell you, man, that gives you some perspective. And the way that these coping with urges role playing, it could give you some actual, hands-on experience in dealing with it, or maybe develop an avoidance phrase that you wouldn't have thought up if you hadn't had that little practice role play. It's always fun. I've always loved it. You can kind of have some fun doing it, but also get some actual life experience. Maybe pick up a few things. Human interaction to get our experience is always a really good thing, because human interaction is always where we're at when we relapse. So, it's a good little tool. Refusing to use in social situations, I said I wasn't going to mention it to myself, but that's a no-brainer for us, because we don't use in any situations, because our next rip and run could be our last rip and run, because it's happening every day. We probably all know multiple people who have died within the last few years. Some that might have been clean and used one time and now they're dead. So that's an easy one for us. No social use. Okay, here's this exercise worksheet. It's got to do with acronym called DEEDS, which is deny, escape the trigger, avoid the trigger, attack the urge, accept the urge, distract yourself with an activity, and substitute for addictive thinking. So all these things in this worksheet are basically based on things we've talked about previously in this chapter. So it's a good culminative thing that you can go down here and one of those acronyms that you can refer to, like the 3 Ps, or how I talk about ICC, identify, challenge, change, and referring to it's so easy to think of and refer back to that. Getting some of these things down on paper and then working through them multiple times, referring back to it can almost become second nature, after a while. So this is a really, if you didn't do anything else in this chapter, I would say this is probably one of the more important things to do. And this last thing, where did I put it? I still got one more page to cover, but I wanted to jump ahead and talk about the ABCs of coping with urges. And this is super duper important. Okay, it's 4.9. It's one of the last exercises. If not it might be the last exercise. Yeah, it's the last real exercise in the chapter, but it's another one of those acronyms. So the ABC, A stands for activating event, B stands for belief about the event, C stands for consequences of irrational belief, D is for dispute the irrational belief, and E is effective thinking change. So basically, when we talk about identifying, challenging, and changing, this is adding very descriptive steps to that. And only we can know our activation events, and only we know deep down our irrational beliefs and all of these things that we've used kind of as weapons to aid our addictive behavior. And I just would ask you to be very honest with yourself when you make this list. It's just for you, no one else. Or if you got to hand it in, make one for yourself. You know? But just like everything else, it's right there. Put these things down helps a lot, but it can also bring up a lot of things you need to work on, maybe are scared to face. When they say take a fearless and searching moral inventory, it's just words until you really start doing it. I mean, I know I thought all the acronyms and the 12 steps and the cookie cutter ways of doing things were just kind of, they weren't me until I started doing them and realized, you know, that, well, there's a reason more than one person has done this before, and that people have been doing these programs and working them is because you work it and it works, man. It works. It's not just another thing for you to piece out, put into your program, because only you can know your program, and only us together can get through all this stuff and come out the other end a changed human being, you know. I see. Sorry about the silence. I just was thinking it's been a crazy week. I've seen a lot of struggle this week. There's a lot of unfortunate people out there. There's a lot of crazy things going on. There is a lot of negative juju in the air, and this time of year, I know I said it last time we talked, this time of year is rough on a lot of people, especially people who've been in some of the situations we're in. Always remember that there are probably 9 other people who have done 10 times what you've done, and they're dead, and you're alive, and you're in this program, and it's for a reason. I hate to get all serious and stuff, but it's true. And these things, these tools, if you let them, they can save your life, man. You just need belief in your higher power, a good foundation for recovery, faith in the right people, and motivation. And that's all I got this week, guys. I'm sorry I had to condense this into a 30-minute video with it being such a big chapter, but with the things we covered, I think you guys can look through it and make some pretty good things for future reference and to help you right now. This week, we're going to make the code word Brit. My nephew Britt Stevens threw 4 touchdown passes in his playoff game. It should have been 7, but I'm not going to go into that. But big ups to him. So the password is Brit. Like I said before, guys, if you need to talk to anybody, text me. You can call the front office and be like, hey, I watched the video. I mean, I can prove it. The password's Brit, and I'd like to get his phone number so I can talk to him anytime, guys. So I hope all you had a very good Thanksgiving. I hope we all continue to have a good holiday season together. Remember, guys, it's just work the program, keep it going, and I've got faith in every single one of you, because if I can do it, anyone can do it, all right? God bless you. Have a good night, and we'll see you next time.